And we're going to continue with part 2 of our series called What to Do When Life Sucks. And we're just going to pick up right where we left off last week. But let me just kind of give you a snapshot by way of introduction today to our week this past week. It's like the perfect week to have this illustration, I think. And for those of you who don't know, we live about 25 minutes south of here. And my wife and I, we bought a house about 5 or 6 years ago. And from day one, she's wanted to do some things differently to the kitchen. And when I say to the kitchen, she wanted different countertops, and she wanted, to paint the cabinets and various things. And so we decided to wait until, just to make sure the timing was right financially and doing everything. And so we decided this was our year. We were going to do it. And so about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we started the process, and we thought, well, construction's out of control. It'll be March before this happens, right? Well, no, it happened quickly. And so we ended up having the countertops replaced, and then we had some other things done, and now the cabinets were being painted this week. Well, she talked to several painters, and one of the guys said, you know what, we'll come in, we'll cover everything, and won't be a big deal. Now, when they say cover everything, I thought they meant like a few things. I didn't know they were going to make a house of plastic. Like, literally, in our house, I didn't understand the difference in, I know you got to spray. I didn't understand overspray and all that stuff, and some of y'all shaking heads like, oh yeah, I get it. I didn't, all right? And so when we go in our house now, we have a bonus room upstairs. Our bedroom's on one side of the house. We only have 2 ways into our house and out of our house. And we don't have access to pantries, and we don't have access to anything. And I didn't know this going in. And so the only 2 entrances and exits to our house are our back bedroom door, and then around through the garage, which also has tape, and there's a slit in that door that you can get in. That's it. That's the only ways in and the only way out. And then when you get in, you can't get access to everything because there's like walls of plastic. And so my boys, I'm not lying when I tell you, they are going in and out their window, taking a shower and meeting us in the car when we leave. And so we're going in and out of our bedroom, and then there's this bonus room door we have to crawl under plastic to go. So 2 nights ago, they started really spraying everything on Fridays, and we came in, and I didn't realize, man, if those of you who huff paint in your younger years, or even if you do it today, man, I'm just going to tell you, don't do too much of that stuff, because it'll put you, anything I say today, I cannot be held accountable for. I'm just going to say. So we all slept in our bonus room, totally unprepared for this whole situation. So we make our way into our, it felt like G.I. Joe making its way into the bonus room. We all slept on different components and mattresses upstairs, huffing paint all night long on Friday night. We woke up Saturday, and they're back spraying again, and I get my kids out of the house, and Julie's here for the peer training, for the peer council training. And then last night, so funny, our neighbor texted Julie last night and said, hey, are y'all okay? Because I saw a kid walking around with a blanket out in the yard, and then we saw people climbing in windows, and are y'all okay over there? And they're the people that recommended the painters, so they kind of get it. And they said, do y'all need a place to stay? And so we're like, yeah. So last night we slept in our neighbor's basement. And then we got up this morning and drove our car from our neighbors, which was like 50 feet, over to our house because we're bougie like that. And so it's been like we have this dream of this nice kitchen and new bookshelves and all this kind of stuff. And we have this vision of what it's going to look like. But right now we're in the messy middle. Come on, somebody say messy middle. Messy middle. I use that as an illustration to conjure up some emotion because that's a practical thing. We are in the middle of a fast, as you know, 21 days of prayer and fasting. We got a night of worship coming up on a Friday night and in a couple weeks. And we went out last weekend and bought $281 worth of food for the fast because we're doing fruits and vegetables and various things. Little did I know that when they said they were going to tape everything, they also meant saran wrap the refrigerators where all our fasting food is. So now you ever tried to do a fruits and vegetables fast with fast food? I mean, come on. Or with a restaurant. So now our fast is taking on a whole new meaning for our kids. It's like fast food. That's what it's become. And we're trying to figure this whole thing out. And so it's been a whirlwind. And, just the huffing of paint all the way to not sleeping when you're in your neighbor's basement and climb. Truthfully, I feel like my kids are rappelling. It ain't long. They're going to be rappelling down the side of the house. And so it's been one of those weeks. But that's it'll be over Wednesday. Okay, so it's like a week. It's a short-term messy middle in our house, but the reality is so many of us are in the messy middle of our lives. And that messy middle, you don't know how long it's going to. They don't say, hey, we'll be out by Wednesday. It's like, we'll be out by 2037. The last 18 months, we thought it was going to be a 3-week messy middle, but it's a 2-year messy middle, right? And so I tell you that because I want to go back to the story in the Bible It's not just a story. It's not just a fairy tale. It's a real life event. It was very monumental in the history of the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, but also really for our own lives. When we look at the story of Jesus and the lineage of Jesus and the various things that happened from Israel, this is a powerful story in God's redemptive plan. And so Joseph was the youngest of 12 brothers. He was 17 years old when he had a dream. He was the favorited son. He had a robe that was richly ornamented. It was the one of those like, he gets a nice robe because he's dad's favorite. And the other 11 brothers weren't too happy because Joseph has a dream, and in his dream, he sees his brothers and his father and mother bowing down to him, and the boy don't understand that sometimes things are better kept to yourself. When you're 17 and the youngest, and you're telling everybody older, one day you're going to bow down to me, that is probably not the wisest use of your words for that day. And so he tells them that, and they conjure up a plan to sell him into slavery. They were going to kill him. Luckily, by the grace of God, I think God's hand was at work in this whole situation. They decide not to kill him, but rather to sell him into slavery. And they put him in a pit. And in that pit, out of that pit, ultimately he's later sold into slavery in Potiphar's house in the nation of Egypt. Now, in Potiphar's house, you got to understand, he was a slave. Here's a boy who thinks he's going to have the world bowing down to him, is now down to sweeping floors and cleaning up somebody's house. He's a slave. And I don't mean like he's a blessed. I mean, he starts at the bottom. Well, he works his way up in the idea that he finds favor in the eyes of God. And then he's put in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. And after being put in charge of everything in Potiphar's house, he's later accused by Potiphar's wife. We're going to get to that. We like to call her Potiphar because she had a lust problem. And so she accuses him. He ends up going to prison because of the accusations. In the prison cell, he's back at the bottom of the totem pole. He works his way up, finds favor with God in the prison cell. He's still in the messy middle. God finds favor. He meets a butler and a baker. They have dreams. He interprets their dreams because he's got a history with dreams. And now he interprets their dreams. I don't understand this whole thing either. But now the butler and the baker are butler and the baker to none other than Pharaoh, the king of the world at the time, basically, the most powerful man in the world. They go back to Pharaoh's palace. One of them goes back to Pharaoh's palace and tells Pharaoh, hey, we met a man in prison because Pharaoh has a dream. Well, they say, well, we know a man who interprets dreams. So now Joseph, because he interprets dreams, finds himself in front of Pharaoh, would later become the second most powerful man in the world. Pharaoh has a dream, 7 fat cows, 7 skinny cows, and he goes, I don't understand my dream. And Joseph says, well, you're going to have 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. So in that 7 years of abundance, you need to store up for the 7 years of famine. He goes, I like this guy. So he puts him in charge of the entire nation. He's the most powerful, second most powerful man in the world, second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. And now there's 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine, and Joseph is managing all of this. And then you fast forward some 20-ish years later when his dream actually becomes a reality, but we got 20 years of the messy middle. 20 years. Some of you are like, I'm in year 47. When is this going to end? I told you this last week. Let's review. There was a time in your past when your past was your future. And that sounds so confusing until you simplify it over the last 3 years. In 2019, 2020 and 21 were your future. In 2022, 2020 and 2021 are your past. The question is, what are you going to do differently in 2022 than you did in 2019? Let's be honest. We were woefully unprepared for a lot of things that happened. The question is, what have we learned in the messy middle? What have we learned in our life? Because the problem is, you and I find ourselves in the messy middle. And we don't know what to do because we're stuck. We're like, this is not what we saw. We saw an end goal. We saw the future. We saw a great family, a good marriage, great kids. We saw a great job, but we got fired and we got divorced and our kids ran off. This is messy. And how long is it going to last? Or as a child, we had dreams and then we were hurt by our parents, or somebody abused us, or somebody ran off on us, or something happened, and we find ourselves in the messy middle now 10, 20, 30 years later, and you're going, God, what are you trying to show me? Can I tell you, we can learn a lot from the story of Joseph. But sometimes the easiest way to learn is to learn by looking what? Backwards. And so David, some years later, David was the king of the nation of Israel. David had his ups and his downs. He started as a shepherd boy. He would end up being the king of the nation of Israel, one of the favorited kings really one of the most powerful kings in the nation of Israel's history. Ultimately, when we look back, Jesus follows in that bloodline. We see David compared to Jesus a lot because he was a savior in Israel, a political savior, a king. Jesus would be a Messiah, more of a spiritual savior. But you see this parallel because David, the Bible says, was a man after God's own heart. Now, David did some jacked up stuff. Let's not get it wrong. But he repented of his sin. He turned to God. And we see in the Psalms, he would write psalms of lament. He would write psalms of praise, psalms of thanksgiving, psalms of sadness, psalms of loss. And in this particular psalm, in Psalm 105, I think last week I told you Psalm 9. I don't know. I got confused. Probably that was before I huffed the paint. But Psalm 9, Psalm 105, he actually says this. He gives you these historical account of what happened in Joseph's life. And I think if we can just look at this, we can learn so much about how to respond in the messy middle. What does David say in a psalm about the life of Joseph that we can learn from? He says this in verse 16. He, God, called down famine on the land and destroyed all of their supplies of food. Now, not just Egypt, the whole world. This is important because the Israelites are in famine, but they don't know to store up the 7 previous years. Only Egypt knows this. And it says, and he sent a man before them. Who's he? God sent a man, Joseph, before who? Them, his family. And the Israelites sold as a slave. So God is sending a man by way of slavery. Wait, that's the vehicle you chose, God? I mean, you gave me this dream, but you chose to carry me there through a really sloppy, messy middle. They, his brothers, the slave owners, they bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put into irons until what he foretold came to pass. In other words, he was in this season of trauma, of hurt, of pain, of messiness until it finally came to pass. Until the word of the Lord proved him true. Now, let me just pause. If you have a dream and you tell your brothers they're going to bow down to you one day and that dream don't come true, you're an idiot. But it does. But I imagine some 5 years. In fact, the entire reasoning behind his brothers selling him was to keep the dream from coming to pass. But God always has an end game. God always has a long game. It's hard to understand when you're in the messy middle. And then it says, the king sent and released him, the ruler of peoples, set him free. Pharaoh says, you know what? I'm going to get you out of prison. I'm going to let you come manage the crops that are coming, manage the 7 years of abundance, and I'm going to let you do whatever you want. Just make sure I got food on my table and our country's taken care of. That's what the king did. He made him master of his household and ruler over all that he possessed. And he allowed him to instruct his princes. Now, he's the second most powerful man in the world as he pleased and teach his elders wisdom. What am I trying to say? Ultimately, we see him in a pit. We see him in prison. We see him in Potiphar's house. You see, it's a lot of P's here. That's why pastors alliterate their messages with all P's, because it happened here. You go to the pit, Potiphar's house, the prison, and the palace. That's the P's that happened in his life. But he doesn't know when the palace is coming, you see? He's in the messy middle for a long time. And so what we learned last week is this: in the middle of what is happening, you have to learn the difference between what you are seeing and what God is saying. And that's hard. In the messy middle, I see what I see. And sometimes it's hard to hear what God is saying. And so we ended last week, something you've heard: control what you can, don't obsess over what you cannot. Just be honest. That's out of my control. And so I'm not going to continue to replay this over and over in my mind. This is what anxiety is, by the way, and worry. Replaying something over and over and over in our mind. And so too many of us allow what we cannot control to keep us from what we can control. And so what can we control? We're in the messy middle. We're like Joseph. Life sucks right now. For some people, what are you doing? We're learning that in the messy middle, we're controlling our attitude and our outlook on life. But then there's this phrase. What do you do? I hate these 3 words. In the meantime. How long is the meantime? I don't know, but it's a mean time. The meantime is not fun, is it? The meantime means we just wait. The meantime is we just do what we can right now. The meantime means I don't know if that's today, tomorrow, next year, or when I die. But in the meantime, What do we do? So in this messy middle, in the meantime, what are you and I to do? I'm going to give you 4 basic things right from this story, and I think it'll be life-changing if we'll apply them to our lives. Number 1, you learn from your mistakes. Okay, so if I had to do this whole painting thing over again, I'd do it different, right? I would actually probably go away and say, take my house for a week, I'm going on vacation. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. We didn't know that this was total loss of everything. You got a pillow and a bed and a bathroom. That's all you have. And to be quite frank with you, that's a lot more than a lot of people have. Let's get that out there. But I would have done it differently. We probably would have said, okay, can you give us a little more clarity? But I can't go back and change that, can we? We can't go back and say, all right, well, let's just start over. We don't get a redo on that. Some of the things that have happened to us, though, we can still learn from things. Even if you didn't make the decision, somebody else did it. There's some things you can learn. Let's talk about what Joseph learned. Joseph decides, he wakes up from his dream. He can't wait. He's sitting over his Lucky Charms the next morning. It's really porridge, but we'll call it Lucky Charms. Lucky Charms the next morning. His brothers come in. He's like, hey, y'all, let me tell y'all something. Can you just say bad idea? Bad idea. 17 years old, tells all his brothers, and they go, oh, well, we'll fix this. Here's what I wonder. Some things have happened to some of us. Some of the things are our own fault. Some of them are other people's fault. But what did you learn in that moment? What did you learn from your mistakes, from what other people did to you? What have you learned? And I'll tell you what Joseph learned. Joseph learned to shut up about his dreams, and over time he learned to listen to other people's dreams. Imagine him rolling up in Potiphar's house. He's sold into slavery. Potiphar's like, sweep the floors. He's like, nah, dog, I ain't doing that. The world's going to bow down to me. Now let me remind you what Potiphar did. Potiphar was the captain of the guard. Let me give you another word for that. Chief executioner. Imagine Joseph at 17 rolling up into Potiphar's house. Maybe he's turned 18. I don't know the season. Rolling up into Potiphar's house, telling the chief executioner about his dreams. That's a bad idea. He learned from his mistakes. And so he rolls up into Potiphar's house. He just says, all right, I'll do what I can. Later in the messy middle, he finds himself in a prison cell. Now, in the prison cell, he asks, what can I do? We'll look at this in a minute. But he hears from a butler and a baker. The butler and the baker are from Pharaoh's palace. Can you imagine if they share their dream? Let me tell you my dreams. And then Joseph's like, well, let me tell you my dreams. Did y'all ever see the One-Up Girl on Saturday Night Live? It'll be worth your time while you snowed in with this apocalypse today to roll up into YouTube and just put One-Up Girl Saturday Night Live. It didn't matter what you said. She had a one-up. In other words, you can say, my dad was the president. And they're like, yeah, well, my dad owned Mars. I mean, that's what she would say. She would just, and you're like, it was just so extreme. Now, Joseph has a dream that his brothers and his mom and dad are going to bow down. Do you know sometimes when we don't know when to keep our mouth shut the most is when we're the most insecure? So he's at a low. He's in a prison cell. And they're like, hey, I had a dream. He's like, oh, well, let me tell you. No, he doesn't do this because he's learned from some past mistakes. If he had not learned from opening his mouth at 17 and continues to open his mouth and does it, instead he interprets their dreams instead of telling about his own. Do you know if he doesn't do that, he likely never finds his way to Pharaoh's palace? See, some of us, we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And I just wonder, now listen, I don't know God's plan, and I don't know if God said, Joseph, I told you that dream, but I didn't mean for you to share it. But now that you shared it, I'll fix the way back to the palace. I don't know. I don't know if God's plan was, hey man, just keep that to yourself and it's going to happen one day. I don't know why Joseph went through what he went through, but ultimately he found himself in the position because he ran his mouth too much. Later, he learns to shut up and listen. And it's amazing because if he continues to run his mouth, likely there's another setback along the way. So here's my question. What are the mistakes, you, me, us, that we've made in our past that we can learn from in our present? See, Joseph could easily say, my brothers did this to me. Well, I could argue, well, you should have never opened your mouth. Is that a logical conversation? If he never opens his mouth and says, hey, y'all, check this out, y'all gonna bow down to me, then then it doesn't happen this way. So the question is, what part of it can you own? Here's another. What situations in your life contributed to your current crisis? Well, I mean, we lost a job and we ain't got no money. Well, how much debt did you rack up on credit cards before you lost your job? Don't blame your boss for your previous debt. You see what I'm saying? Don't blame your spouse because you didn't deal with what your dysfunction before you got married. Do you see where I'm coming from? So some things aren't your fault, but what part of that can I earn in the process? Here's another question. Who or what needs to be removed from your life? Not your spouse. You're like, dang it. Now, if you're facing a major abusive situation, that's a different conversation. Please let us know. Email us, care@relevantchurch.cc. We'll walk you through that process. Nothing to be ashamed of. We want to, but just to say, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to move on from him. That is not the answer. But there are some situations, there are some seasons and people and places that you put yourself in, you need to remove from your life because they continue to be a trigger or something in your life that sends you down a path. What patterns need to change? When are you going to stop doing things your way? When am I going to stop doing things my way? When are we going to stop facing things alone and actually get help? That's why we have peer counselors that are training right now so that you can have somebody to walk through things with you. You got to learn from your mistakes and make the changes that are within your control. Number 2, don't let your big dreams keep you from doing little jobs. I told the first service, we had some parking people call out. I'm going out in the parking lot between services. And I got my white shoes dirty. I like my white shoes. You know why? Because somebody's pulling up for the first time going, I'm giving church a chance. I don't care if it's snowing or it's an apocalypse or if it's pretending to snow. I want them to find Jesus and know that there's a church that loves them and cares for them. There's no job too little for. Do I believe God's called us to pastor a church and lead a church of 10,000 people? Yeah, but if we don't care for the one, it don't matter. And so at the end of the day, listen, at the end of the day, some of the pits that we are in our lives are simply because our lives are not what we thought they would look like, and so we sit back and wallow in our mess. So let's be honest. Let's take it back to a simple illustration. If I were to go home today and go, my cabinets aren't done, listen, everything, I don't have anywhere to sit. Everything's covered and it's got paint all over it. But if I just laid on my couch covered with plastic and covered with paint and pouted, you'd be like, you're crazy. That's stupid. But we do it every day. God, that's what I dreamed of. That's what I wanted. That's how my life is. But I'm stuck right here. And we're saying, what do we do? What do we do? And he says, listen, we give up too quickly, don't we? We aren't willing to do the smaller things today that contribute to the bigger whole. And there's things right in front of us. God presents us with opportunities, one little opportunity at a time, and we can't see it, and we're not willing to do it at times because we see the big thing that we haven't achieved yet. Before Joseph ran a country, he was faithful as a slave. He was faithful in Potiphar's house, in the chief executioner's house, the captain of the guard. He was an official of Pharaoh, and he was a slave. Then when he's in prison, you know what he asked the warden? What can I do? What can I do? Ultimately, one thing after little thing after little thing after little thing, now he's running the entire prison because he's found favor. Some of us can't find the favor of God because we aren't doing the things that God puts in front of us. You know, if I say to my kid, hey, buddy, if you do this, I'll reward you with that. You know that as a parent. You know that as a kid if you've been on the receiving side of that. God's saying, I got something for you to do, and you're like, I'm too good for that. We've all been there. So he asked, what did he do? Then he ran the prison because God was with Joseph even in the messy middle. Here's the third one. Y'all are going to like this one. Take the road less traveled. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing because a lot of people I know are cray-cray. I don't care there are times I look at people on social media and Instagram and various things, and I'm like, I don't, please, for the love of God, if I ever end up like that, take all technology from me. I don't need to live up to somebody else's hype or expectation or fall into the emotional pit of needing to be liked by other people. Culture says, let everybody like you. God says, just honor me. Don't live for the double taps of others. That's the new common language, I guess. We used to call it approval. Now it's just double taps. It ain't even approval. It's just like I'm robotically double tapping. And so we said this when we got married. Julie and I said, we are going to think and we are going to live and we are going to act and we're going to everything we do, we're going to do it counter-culturally. Because culture, you want to get your life sucking really bad? Follow culture. This is the difference between your flesh and your spirit. The Spirit of God at work in you versus the flesh of your own self. And so Potiphar knew that his house was being blessed because of Joseph. I mean, the Bible says Joseph found favor. And now Potiphar's going, man, this dude's blessing me. But look what happens. Joseph's in Potiphar's house. He's been given access to everything. He can do anything he wants. The only thing he don't have access to is one thing, Potiphar's wife. And now, temptation comes. The Bible says that Joseph was handsome. He was like that Jason dude with the chest and the beard and the long hair. I'm sad you know that. And so, at the end of the day, you know what I'm talking about? Like, there's only like 3 or 4 people in the Bible that said he was handsome. This is one of them. And it says that Potiphar's wife, she had longing eyes. She had a lust problem. And she said, come to bed. In others, she said, come have sex with me. And he said, no. And she said, no, come on. And he said, no. And so he ran out of the house. And the Bible says she grabbed his coat and stripped it off of him. It's the second time they tried to take the coat off of him. You know what the enemy's trying to do? Rob you of God's destiny for you. And so then, why would Joseph say no? Because why would you have any allegiance to a God who allowed you to get in that situation in the first place? Why? Let me just further make it complicated for you. We live in a day where we can look back and say, oh, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery. That hadn't happened yet. Joseph don't go, oh, well, Moses, no. Then, he don't even have a father figure he can look up. Listen, his family had a pretty jacked up sexual lives as well. His father has 4 wives and his older brother Reuben done slept with one of them. That's pretty jacked up. He can't sit there and go, well, nobody taught me. The Bible says the law of God is written upon your heart in Romans, and the Spirit bears witness within your conscience. This is why at like 7 years old, nobody got to tell you not to do something. And you can have that fluttering heart and you go, oh my God, what is that? That's the Spirit bearing witness within your conscience. You say, I don't feel that anymore. Maybe because your heart is hardened to the things of God. And so, listen, write this down. Your life circumstances never give you the right to dishonor God. I'll say it this way. You'll like this. This is modern day language. I came up with this one on my own. You must prioritize having inside peace over having a side piece. You didn't see that one coming. You should have came to church today. Look, all the phones got out for that one. See, some of us think of a side piece as being some relational, some affair, someone. No, you define what your side piece is. Your side piece is anything you're trying to fulfill the lack of peace in your soul. And so, you and I we find ourselves staying in an emotional state of chaos because of the mental and physical decisions that we continue to pursue. And Joseph said, no, I am not. Just because Potiphar rips my jacket off and screams rape, I am out of here because I want to honor the God who has a destiny for my life. And so, here comes Potiphar. And his wife said, he raped me. And Potiphar, remind you, what does he do? He kills people. And I'm just going to say, if I show up in my house and my wife tells me, I'm killing you, I'm just going to go and tell you. Please edit that one out of this video, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, you better hide. In that moment, that's going to be my heart. If all I did was get paid to kill people, then that's probably what I'm going to do, right? But I've been washed in the blood, right? I'm free from that. What I'm trying to say to you is you understand the anger. Why is Potiphar not? Here's why. Because this is what I believe. He knew the character of Joseph. I told you last week, people can question and call you out on your reputation, or actually they can have an impression of you, but if they don't know your character, they don't know you. And so instead of killing him, he puts him into prison. Again, the hand of God. And even when the story ends, what happens is his brothers eventually come and bow down, and he gives them food. Oh, no. He could have had all the revenge he wanted on his family and his brothers for throwing him into that pit and selling him into the messy middle for now 20 years. But no, what does he do? He forgives them. You talk about the road less traveled. He forgives them. Next week's message, we're going to pick up right here. It's when past hurts still hurt. And Joseph wept when he saw his family. Here's the fourth one. Don't let your one day keep you from making the most of today. I don't know, I got this dream. I'm going one day. Joseph wanted people to listen and understand his dream. But he learned that sometimes listening to others' dreams is what sets in motion the plans of God for your life. Maybe, let me just say it this way, and let's unpack this statement. It should have been on the screen, but it's my fault because I tell him which ones to put up there. And it didn't make it, but it should have. Maybe the thing keeping you from your God-given destiny is that you are focusing too much on your God-given destiny. Let that sink in. One day. And God says, no, today. You're so worried about one day when this happens, and I need you to step into what I got for you today. But you're so focused on your God-given destiny that you're so miserable in what God has put right before you. The thing that sometimes keeps us from our God-given destiny is we can't quit trying to make our own way to our God-given destiny. We want God to take us out of the messy middle now. And God says, no. What are you doing in the messy middle to prepare for your destiny? He was faithful in Potiphar's house, faithful in the prison. Now he can be faithful in Pharaoh's court. Maybe it took him 20 years to get to the place where he could forgive his brothers. I don't know. But every day, today, every Sunday, you have the opportunity, I have the opportunity to prepare for your God-given destiny by taking a step today, because your next step is your best step. Opportunities every week to find freedom. But you haven't learned that everything you've been coping with, all the things you've been doing to cope with the issues and the trauma and the things that you've been through, you keep doing the same thing over and over, and you want, well, why ain't it getting better? Because you didn't learn, it didn't work last time. This new relationship ain't gonna work either. This new church, this new season, this new diet, this new fad, this new whatever, you gotta change some things from the inside out. You gotta find some freedom first. This is why we have the Good Life starting, and I can't tell you how much people are finding freedom. And the people who finish it out are going, okay, all right, some people go, all right, I'm done. No, there's still another step. People are going to emotionally healthy spirituality and getting counseling. And then some are going to divorce care and grief. They're realizing, you know what? If I'm going to achieve my God-given destiny, I got to deal with what's going on today. You can discover purpose by serving and giving and helping others. But too often, we just sit back and go, no, one day I'm going to do this. And he goes, no, what are you going to do today? I know people, I've met pastors or people who say, I feel like God's calling me to be a pastor, but they're not even serving in the church they're in. I don't want you to be my pastor. If you can't serve the church you're in, 15 years old, I would leave baseball practice early. I had dreams of playing in the majors, like everybody does that plays the game, and then has the same story that we all got injured and because we really weren't good enough, whatever it is, right? Dreams and aspirations, and there were opportunities on the table. And every practice, every Wednesday, I would leave at a certain time to go to the church and set up the chairs for the youth service by myself, only to have my youth pastor come in and say, they're not right, and change them. It's a messy middle. So I started doing them wrong on purpose. Didn't do that. I didn't know God was preparing me for a portable church where we had to bring the chairs in and bring the walls in and bring the kids ministry in and set it all up and set it all down. I didn't know at 15 years old when I was like, this is terrible. This is not ministry. I didn't know that 15 years later, I'd be begging people and say, hey, you want to join me on this journey to start a church and set up 300 chairs in a gymnasium every single week because we want people to come to know Christ? It was the messy middle, but it's part of a bigger dream. Every single time. Tell me you want to be a pastor if you're not serving and giving and generous. Tell me that. I know young adults, I know people who pretend they'll give their life for something. I'll lay down my life for my wife. I'll lay down my life. I'll take a bullet for them, but you won't die daily for her. You won't die to your own desires. You treat her like crap. You treat him like crap. You won't die daily, but don't mess with my family. Well, you stop messing with your family. I'm tired of men who won't lead by laying down their life. Is it too far? And so at the end of the day, people say, I lay down, I love my church. I lay down my life for my church, but you don't serve. Love is an expression, not a saying. I know young adults, listen to me, young adults. Culture has lied to you. You're sitting back, you're dreaming of your one day. You're dreaming of your one day, and all you're doing is looking at all the influencers on TikTok and Instagram that think you're in. Now we got an Insta destiny. No. Stop it. We got young adults things happening in the coming week. Get your rear end plugged into the church as a whole, not just throughout the big C capital church. Make a difference and do what you can right now at 17, 22, 25, 28. You say, I'm just going, when I get married and have kids, then no. You make the most of right now. We need you, but you need us. What are you saying? I'm almost done. Joseph had an incredibly important dream. It took decades to fulfill. For years, he lived in the messy middle. One takeaway today: make the most of the messy middle. It's real simple. Make the most of today. Get involved. 20 people in whatever this junkie is outside. I think I saw like 3 snow flurries. 20 people are welcome to Relevant right now, starting a journey toward getting plugged in. 20 people. Last I heard, close to 70 people sign up for the good life. Make the most of the messy middle. Because when God says, hey, come on into Pharaoh's court, are you going to be ready? Are you going to be ready? There's always a bigger picture. We've been saying this on our staff and our development. We got to play the long game. We got to play the long game and realize that, hey, today matters, tomorrow matters, the next day matters. And then one day, and then we're going to talk about it next week. 20 years have passed, the dream comes to reality, but there's a major moment in Joseph's life. A major moment that he's going to have to overcome. And so if you got people that got some past hurts and some past pains, next week is the week for them. If it snows and it goes ballistic, fine, we'll figure out something else. But as of now, you get them here. So I'm going to talk about when past hurts still hurt. Hopefully God will be able to resurrect some things, some dead things in people's lives. I'm asking you to stand with me. We're going to sing this song. And it simply says this: I believe that I will see the goodness of my God. God of my present, God of my future. You hold it all together. So whatever you're going through, I'm going to ask you to take these next 3 or 4 minutes. Make this your prayer. You say what to do when life sucks. I gave you 4 steps today. I want you to take this moment in the middle of all your miry clay. David talks about, you set my feet upon a rock. You pull me out of the pit. Listen, sometimes, and we'll talk about this at the end of the series, sometimes you got to worship in the middle of your prison. You got to praise in the middle of your prison to see God do his thing. And so you got to take your natural and get it close enough for God's supernatural to take it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we're sitting back here going, God intervene, God intervene. Said, well, you got to get close enough. Because I'm going to pick you up right here, but you got to get there. You got to do what you can do. God, I pray in these moments right now that these words would impact people's lives and their destiny forever. In Jesus' name.